Honestly, it was about 5 seconds later because I stepped on the scale and I looked at it. And again, my first thought was, scale's broken. We'll try a different one. When I stepped on the second scale and the third scale and they all said the same thing, I realized three scales, probably not all broken at the same time. And that really was the moment where I stopped and thought, okay, I have a serious problem. And the problem isn't just the weight. The problem is that as soon as I saw the weight, I refused to believe the evidence. So now it's not just a health problem, it's a mental problem because I'm choosing to ignore what's right in front of my face. Okay, well that we seriously need to deal with.
That is Joel Hawbaker this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey, everybody. How's it going? I am hoping that you were blessed with some beautiful weather this weekend, wherever you are. Oddly enough, it seems as though just as I said that, I glanced up to look out the window and I think it's raining here. Yesterday was a beautiful day. I had a chance to get outside and enjoy the sunshine a little bit. I am hoping that you did as well. Today was the Escape the Cape Triathlon, and unfortunately, this is the first year in, I don't know, 4 to 5 years probably, that I did not participate in the race this morning. And it is heartbreaking, and sometimes being an adult absolutely sucks, and I missed it terribly. But I am hoping that if you raced this morning, you had an amazing day, you had fun, you got a chance to enjoy it, and maybe even had a little bit of a personal best while you were out there this morning. So I hope that everyone enjoyed. I hope that you had a chance to enjoy your weekend in one way or another. Um, as for this week's guest, my guest this week is Joel Hawbaker. And Joel is a speaker, he's an author, he's a coach, and he is an award winning teacher. And I got the chance to connect with Joel, and I am really looking forward to sharing this interview with you because this is it's an interesting interview, and it's something that I haven't really gotten a chance to share with people yet. And Joel's specialty is that of blended families because Joel went through a pretty bad divorce himself. And this was following some very poor decisions that Joel had made. And so, as a result of these decisions, Joel ended up separating from his wife. He put on a lot of weight and he was very, very overweight. And as you'll see, the running theme through this was Joel was blaming everyone else and not looking at himself. And so when Joel went to step on a scale in Walmart, he saw that he was significantly overweight from when he was an athlete, but he blamed it on the scale. And so 3 scales later, he finally realized that it was not, in fact, the scale, it was him. And so we take a really nice path through Joel's story, and we get a chance to dive in and hear what it was like and hear what he was up to and how he was blaming others and not taking responsibility. So I've already given enough away. I don't want to give any more away. I would like to let Joel do the storytelling. So without further ado, here is my interview with Joel. All right, Joel. So you ready to kick this off then?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
All right, man. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on here. I know that you have a very busy schedule with a lot of things going on. So I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time to jump on the podcast with me this evening. And I'm really looking forward to diving into your story a little bit here. And if you could just do me a favor, please introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit of what you've been up to recently, and what really interests you and what you have going on.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited about being on the podcast. I love doing this sort of thing and having these kind of conversations to try to encourage and inspire other people. I'm 36 years old, divorced and remarried, living in Alabama in the town where I grew up. I'm a high school teacher and coach, and I'm also a professional speaker and an author. And the things that I focus on are things that are dear to me, things I have experience with. So the topics that I talk about are education and leadership, and especially blended family life, because that's a big part of my story and what I'm all about. And so I've got two daughters from my first marriage. One is almost 15 at the time of this recording, the other one is 12. We also have two giant rescue dogs, Butterscotch and Bruiser, that hopefully will be quiet while we're recording. And and that's a large chunk of my life is just being with my family and teaching high school and traveling around speaking and stuff. So that's a bit of who I am and what I'm about. And again, I'm really excited to be chatting with you tonight. Thank you for having me on.
Well, first off, I would like to say my hat goes off to you as a high school teacher because my girlfriend is a first grade teacher, and I
Oh, God bless her.
actually, and you know what's funny? That's what all high school teachers say. So all
Yes,
elementary school teachers say, "God bless you, high school teachers," and all high school teachers
that's
say,
right.
"God bless you, elementary school teachers."
Yeah,
Now,
not enough money in the world to make me teach first grade kids.
well, so for me, I went to school for health and phys ed to be a health and phys ed teacher, and
Okay.
health and phys ed certification here in the state of PA, which is from what I've told, one of the most widely accepted, like across the board certifications. Our cert is K through 12. So when we do
Oh, wow. Okay.
our student teaching is actually split. So we have half of the semester in an elementary setting and then
Okay.
half of the semester in a secondary setting, which could be middle school or it could be high
Right.
school.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big
Um,
big differences there too.
well, I must say, my secondary placement, I quite honestly could not wait for it to be over. Like, I was placed in middle school. I wasn't placed in high school.
Yeah, that's rough.
But yeah, it was rough. It was really, really rough. So yeah, my hat goes off to anybody who's a high school teacher. And you said you're also a coach, so you're coaching soccer. And
Correct.
when we were going through scheduling, you said that your soccer season had just ended. Now, up here, soccer is actually a fall sport. That's like the primary season
Yes.
for it. So is
Correct.
it the same for you, and you guys just had like a
No.
spring kind of
Well,
season,
see,
or
yeah, the thing is, I live in Alabama and college football is king. And so in the fall, high school football is king. So the only major guys sport that gets played in the fall at high school level in Alabama is going to be football. And so then everything else that could be on that field gets pushed to the spring. So guys soccer and girls soccer in Alabama in high school are spring sports. So we start our preseason in January, games start in February, and playoffs go through about the middle of May. And again, a lot of that just has to do with the sort of sports culture of the South that's so football heavy, because most high schools don't have a separate soccer facility. You play your soccer games in the football stadium,
mm-hmm.
and so there's no way you're ever going to get priority for soccer over football down here. And that's just, that's okay. That's part of the cultural landscape. So that's something that we do.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't know that at all. And it completely makes sense now that you explain it. But it is also unfortunate
Yeah.
for some of those athletes because
Yeah.
athletes up here, let's say, there are some given just the running background of soccer, a lot of them
Hmm.
could potentially play soccer in the fall and
Yep.
then could play lacrosse in the spring.
Right.
So
Yeah. We
it kind
also
of
don't have a lot of
completely
lacrosse around here. So
no, 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 no. I'm sure you don't. I don't think it's quite made it down that far.
not outside of a couple of I think you got some in Huntsville and some in some of the private schools in Birmingham, but that's about it.
Okay, and how far down are you? What town are you in?
I'm in Anniston, so I'm basically halfway between Birmingham, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm in north central Alabama. If that
Okay.
gives any, like, 90 miles from Atlanta, about 65, 70 miles from Birmingham, 2 hours south of Huntsville, that kind of thing.
Wow. So you're not far from Atlanta, Georgia, but
No, not at all.
you're still an hour behind us,
Correct.
which is really strange.
Yeah, we live about 40 minutes from the border with
Okay.
Georgia, 30 or 40 minutes, and as soon as you cross over, it's Eastern time zone. But yeah, we're central, so it means we don't play a lot of soccer games against teams from Georgia just because of the scheduling nightmare of time switches to and from.
And you and I were kind of joking about that beforehand when it comes to the
Uh-huh.
scheduling of
That's
podcasts and
exactly
everything
it.
else. So yeah, I can't imagine when you start talking about scheduling out soccer games for a high school season, what that could potentially look like. So that totally makes sense.
Yep.
So before we get into a little bit more of your story about how you're a speaker and kind of talking on leadership and blended families and everything, I want to
Hmm.
paint a picture and kind of go through this whole story of Joel, and I want to go back to about 9 years ago or so, when you were going through what I would imagine to be a very difficult time, quite possibly one of the most difficult times that you've probably gone through, and that was the divorce that you were going through. So, can
Hmm.
you tell me a little bit about what was going on during that time?
Yeah, it definitely became, one of the hardest really times of my life. So I got married for the first time when I was 19, and it was just after my sophomore year of college. I'd played soccer my first 2 years, and this was a woman that I'd been dating since the end of my freshman year, but I've known her since the beginning of high school. I met her when I was about 14, and we got married when I was 19, and our first daughter was born about 3 weeks after I got my college diploma. So my whole senior year of college was praying, just dear Lord, let me get my diploma before we have this child, please, because going to school full time and working full time is already busy enough. Trying to do that and have a newborn, I'm not really sure I can handle that. So we had our first daughter, we had our second daughter a couple years after that, and then the same week that our younger daughter was born, we found out my dad had terminal cancer. We were living in North Carolina in Fayetteville at the time. And so we moved back home and I took a job teaching back down here in our hometown of Anniston. And with dad sick, and then he passed away about 18 months after he got sick. Um, honestly, I just started making a series of poor decisions. Um, and what it eventually culminated in was divorce. And so within about a 6 month period, I'd gone through divorce, I'd gone through bankruptcy, gone through foreclosure on the house that we had bought together. You know, I only got to see my kids officially every other weekend. My ex-wife had primary placement, even though we had joint custody. She was good enough to let me see them more often than that, but they weren't living with me, and went through, changed my job as I was going through all of those things. I'd been teaching for a number of years. I got out of teaching for 2 years before I got back into it, and just started, well, not started, continued to make decisions that weren't good for me, health wise or personally, and ended up, putting on a lot of weight. And ended up just working a whole series of jobs that I didn't actually like, but I needed to be working to pay the bills because now, in addition to regular bills, I'm paying child support. And it was it was what I consider to be rock bottom for me. It was a pretty dark time. It was a pretty rough time, and it's not really fun to look back on, but it is good to remember what got me there so that I don't make those same kind of decisions and mistakes in the future.
Now, when it comes to some of these decisions that you were making, would you say that most, if not all, of these decisions were made purely based on emotion and what you were going through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would argue that in general, yes. And I would also say that they were very self-centered decisions. That's the common theme of most of my life, honestly, probably up until I would say 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. The common theme would have been that most of my decisions were just very Joel-centered. What do I want? What do I think is best? What do I prefer? And when you're married, like that's not how the decision-making process is supposed to be. And as a result of a lot of those very selfish decisions, it ended up causing a lot of pain. It ended up causing a lot of heartache, both to my now ex-wife and to our daughters, even though they were pretty young. And so a lot of the last 9 years has been trying to fix some of those things. I'm remarried, and my ex-wife is remarried. She remarried about 6 months before I did. She and her new husband have a son together, a little toddler boy, and our daughters go back and forth each week. We live like 2 miles apart, and so there's a lot of interaction between our households, and so that's why a lot of the work I do now is with blended families because that's something that I live. That's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Um, but it took a lot of work to get here, and it took a lot of changing the decision making habits that I had created throughout my life because yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of them were emotion based rather than uh, I would say logic or reason based, or even more emotion based than prudence based. That's kind of an old fashioned word, but I mean it has to do with common sense and stuff for anybody who's not familiar with that term. Um, I was making decisions based on what I thought was a good idea for the next half hour or for the next 20 minutes or for the next 10 minutes as opposed to what's good for the next 5 years of my life, what's good for the next 10 years of my life. And again, that's I know better than that. I taught kids better than that. But when you're hurting, you're not using your whole brain. You're thinking a lot more with your emotions, and that's a large part of what I was doing at the time.
And you mentioned it a couple times there, and specifically you said, you're thinking with your emotions. So were you
Yeah.
were you actually thinking about these decisions that you were making, even though you weren't considering, how it could impact one, anyone else, or two, the long term? Would you still say there was any sort of consideration when you were making these decisions, or was it purely
I would
just
say
like, this is right in front of me, this is what's going to happen?
it was much more that one. If there was any thinking, it was thinking of trying to rationalize it. It's this isn't that bad. This isn't that big a deal. This isn't gonna cause that many problems. That kind of thing. And it's the same sort of thing that we do from the time we're kids or teenagers, where we know what we're doing is wrong, but as long as we can come up with what seems like even a semi kind of valid excuse for why it might not be as bad as it is, then we'll probably go ahead and go with it. And again, I'm sure some of your listeners know this, when you are hurting, those things are easier to rationalize because you can just use the excuse of, well, I'm in a tough place right now. And again, I don't say that flippantly. I don't say that to try to discount other people's hurt or their decisions. But I know for me, I used my pain at losing my dad. I used that as an excuse for all sorts of stuff that I shouldn't have. And again, it leads to bad decision making, which leads to major consequences.
Now, during this time, there's a lot of people who they turn to lots of different things to kind of chase away that pain. And
Hmm.
so, was there anything specifically that you turned to, for example, substances or alcohol or anything like this that could have also led to the weight gain that you spoke about,
Hmm.
or anything like that?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, there wasn't any. I didn't dabble into drugs. I didn't. I wasn't drinking heavily. I would say that I drank alcohol regularly. I probably had a beer or two pretty much every night. And I'm. You can ask anybody that knows me. I'm a relatively epic lightweight. If I have one beer, I get sleepy. If I have two beers, I'm completely ready for bed. And so for me to be drinking 2 beers a night, that was a lot for me. I know it's not a lot, but for me to be drinking 2 beers a night every night for weeks on end, that was pretty a big deal. But the other part of it was just, I would say what I was really addicted to was just killing time. And so I watched tons of shows online or on TV. I spent a lot of time watching sports because I'm a sports nut anyway. And I had been married with 2 kids, and so most of my life had been hanging out with my wife and kids when I wasn't at school. Well, now that I'm working other jobs and I'm home by myself all the time, I had all this time to kill. And so I got really good at just wasting time in ways that they're not bad in and of themselves, but when that's your whole life, like you're making some poor decisions.
Hmm.
So, if I'm watching 6 hours of the same TV show on Netflix a day, that's not healthy. If I'm sitting down and I'm watching 4 soccer games back to back to back to back, that's not healthy. And if I'm doing all of that while also drinking alcohol every single night to help me fall asleep. Like that's none of those are good things. All of them together are really bad. My eating habits were terrible. I was eating out as much as I could afford to. which is probably not as much as I would have liked, but still much more than I needed to be doing. And even when I was eating at home, like I was just buying junk food and bringing it home and eating it. And so all of those things combined, yeah, I did. I think I put on somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 35 pounds within, I think, the year after the divorce. And you can't tell, we were talking before the interview, I was sitting down, but I am not real big. I stand about 5'3.5" tall. And I knew I had a real problem when I stepped on a scale one day at Walmart. I was just walking through. I said, "Hey, we'll step on a scale and see what it says." And it said 193 pounds. And my first thought was, "Oh, look, their scale's broken." Like when, when your first thought is the scale is probably broken, like that can't be good. And so that was kind of a red flag for me to realize, okay, what I'm doing is not healthy and it's not sustainable and it's not good for me. It's not good for my daughters. And we've got to start making some different decisions.
Well, the other thing I was going to say right there too was it was the same thing as when you were using the excuse of your father passing away. You were pushing it off. So you stepped on the scale, and clearly
Yeah,
when you stepped on the scale, there was a problem. But instead
right.
of at that point coming to terms with the fact and saying, okay, I have a problem and I need to address this problem, you kind of pushed it off and you're like, no, I don't have a
Yeah.
problem.
Yep.
That scale's
That's right.
broken.
No,
I don't have a
that's
problem
right.
at
The
all.
scale is the problem. That's right.
Right.
I'm fine. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's so you kind of stole my thunder there, but I just want to No, no,
Sorry.
no, no. You're totally fine. You're totally fine. It was just I had another follow up question, and you just naturally in the conversation got right to it. But
Mm.
I was going to ask you, and instead I'll kind of just reiterate that some of the bad habits that you were really falling into are things that people can really
Mhm.
relate to, and that is, you come home or you have time to kill, and with that time to kill, you sit down,
Mhm.
you start binge watching a show or binge watching,
Yeah.
some sort of game on TV. You have
Right.
only junk food in the house, or you're ordering food out and
Yep.
you're sitting in front of the
Yep.
TV eating. And,
Yep.
if you do that once a week or once every 2 weeks, it's not really that big of a problem. Is it still healthy? No. But listen, everybody's got to kind of like, quote unquote, let loose whatever their let loose is every once in a while, or else we're all going to go crazy. But the difference was that you were doing this in a day in, day out kind of situation. So this was something that was really
Right.
ongoing, and this was something that you were
Yeah.
doing on a very, very regular basis. So this was a bad
Correct.
habit you formed that
Yep.
really led to the weight gain.
Yeah, and it's, like you mentioned, the thing is it was the path of least resistance. Whatever would kill the time faster, that's what I was going to do. And so if it's faster to cook a frozen pizza than it would be to make a healthy meal, well, that's what I'm going to do. If it's faster to just throw some French fries in the oven instead of getting some fresh vegetables and cooking them, well, that's what I was going to do. And it was the same sort of thing, like you just mentioned. A lot of it was when we are sedentary, when I'm sitting down to watch a game, I want to have something to munch on.
Mm-hmm.
So what have I got? Well, I got potato chips and I've got popcorn and I've got Funyuns or whatever the heck else is there. And it was a whole series of bad decisions just piling on top of each other, and it became kind of this negative feedback loop of, well, I don't feel good and I want to eat. And now that I've eaten a ton, I don't feel good. And now that I don't feel good, I want to eat some more. And anyway, it ended with me getting much heavier than I should have been, and then trying to rationalize the weight.
And now, during this time, you had already mentioned that you stepped away from teaching, and
Hmm.
so I want to know, how else did this point in your life kind of impact your professional life and impact the things that you were doing? Because I would have to imagine that when you walked away from teaching, it was something that you had to do. It wasn't something that you really wanted to do, but teaching was something that you were passionate about. So, are there any other ways that this kind of impacted your professional life?
Yeah, well, so a big part of it was I ended up actually spending more time doing soccer after that because I wasn't coaching high school anymore. I was able to do club stuff, and that's both fall and spring, depending on the age group down here. So I actually spent more time doing soccer once I was out of the classroom. I considered going back to graduate school, but didn't really have the money for it, so that was kind of out the door. But really, what it did is it allowed me to work I say aloud now because I look back on it as a helpful thing. At the time, I hated it. What I ended up doing is working a whole bunch of different jobs and to see if there was some other passion that I might have that I just hadn't ever discovered. So I worked as a bartender. I worked as ironically enough, a financial planner. I worked as an insurance salesman. Um, I worked as a security guard. I worked as a firefighter. I worked as a construction worker and a cement pourer. And, I did all of those things for different periods of time. And I learned from each of those experiences. And I learned a lot of good lessons from them. But I also learned like the one thing I really love is I love teaching people, whether that's teaching people history or Bible, like I do at the school I teach at, or whether that's teaching kids the game of soccer, or whether that's teaching audiences on the stage. Like I love teaching people, and bartending and construction working and firefighting. Like my opportunities to teach in any of those areas was limited at best. And so after 2 years of doing those things, I was really glad to make the decision to go, no, you know what? I really want to go back to being a teacher. Because the thing is, like, after the divorce, it was just like, okay, well, at this point, I've pretty much lost everything. So let's just see what else is out there in terms of like, short of moving away, because I was never going to move away from my kids. It was just a question of what else is available, what else might I be interested in. And so that's why I spent so much time looking at different jobs and trying out different jobs. And again, it taught me that I hated all of them and really I love being in a classroom, and I'm really glad to be able to do that.
I think that's something that's very, very important for people to realize, and that realization that you came to is that it kind of strengthened your passion and
Oh yeah,
your
absolutely.
knowledge for what you love and what you are meant to do. And I think that,
Hmm.
given this time with, and it's definitely changing now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely changing, but I know that when I was coming out of high school, there was this big push that you had to go to college. Like you just graduated
Right.
high school, the next step was you have to go to college. And if
Right.
you don't
Everybody goes to college. That's what you do.
Right. And if you don't know
Yeah.
what you want to do, well, just take your basic classes because, when you
Right.
decide what you want to do, your basic classes are going to help you. And I think that
Right.
it's definitely changing now where there's so many other opportunities and so many other avenues that people can go down. But
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, for me personally, I would not push someone to do anything that they're not like 100% on, but I wouldn't push anybody to go to college if they're not 100% like, yes, that's what I want to do. I would
Hmm.
say go do exactly what you did. Go out and try things. Like go and shadow a construction worker. Go and shadow somebody who's working in
Yep.
HVAC. Go hang out with a car
Yep.
salesman. Go, hang out and find
Yeah.
someone who you can shadow that's a doctor or a lawyer, or like the opportunity is there. You can definitely do it. And I think it's just a matter of you got to find something that you're really passionate about, because if not, you're going to dread it if you're just chasing the paycheck or whatever it is, if you're doing something um,
Right.
for somebody else, really. And that's the whole premise of this podcast. That's exactly why I do this, is to kind of show people that. So I guess we're
Yeah.
I guess we're good. We can just cut it off here.
That's
No,
right.
I'm
We're done.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Perfect. That's the best episode ever. We're done here. No, you're exactly right though. Like that's it. Is what I love to encourage my students to do is to think about what they already like and then find a way to make that their job. Because I mentioned on a podcast interview I did earlier this week, I said I know there's tons of people who make more money than I do. Like I teach at a small private Christian school in small town Alabama. And so I make less than what I would make if I taught in a public school. And I am 100% fine with that. And the reason is because I love what I do. I mean, just about every day I get up and I'm excited about going to school and teaching kids and coaching kids. And I love that. And I make a joke about it. I tell people, I don't make much money, but I get a lot of time off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's a joke, but it's also very true because I still get the same schedule the high school kids do. Tomorrow I give my last exams of the semester and then I'm out for 2 months. Now, I'll still be working, I'll still be doing my speaking stuff like a lot of teachers do over the summer, but in terms of like my day job, I have a whole different schedule, like, with spring break and Christmas break and Thanksgiving and all those things. And so that allows me time to do other things that I'm passionate about, like speaking and writing and coaching in different venues and those kinds of things. So I encourage my students, find something you already love and find a way to work within that area, because then you like what you do. And if you like what you do, you realize money isn't the end. Money shouldn't be your primary motivator. And I know that's easy to say and it's hard to live out, but like, I don't come from money. My mom was a retired nurse, or she was a nurse for her life. She was retired military. My dad was retired military, and because he was a Vietnam veteran, struggled to find a job for years after he retired because of the stigma attached with that. Like, I don't come from money, so it's not like, well, money's not that important. Well, yeah, if you're, a trust fund baby, it may not be that important to you. But that's not me. Like, I just know that I would rather do a job I love instead of working somewhere that I hate to enjoy my vacations and my weekends only. I love just about every day that I get to go to school, and that's something that it's hard to put a monetary value on.
I listen. I'm with you. I'm with you 100% there. I totally get that. I totally get that. And so now, before we kind of get into a little bit more of your teaching and some of the amazing things that you've done there in your speaking, I do have to take just a little bit of a step back here and
Sure.
and go back to that day in Walmart, because you stepped on the scale and you said nope, the scale's wrong, something's broken, right? So
Yeah.
that wasn't your light bulb moment, but you did have a light bulb moment. Something happened that made you say, all right, I got to get this
Yeah.
train back on the rails. This is not how this is supposed to be going. I'm definitely
Right.
doing something wrong here. So what was that light bulb
Well,
moment? What happened?
honestly, it was about 5 seconds later because I stepped on the scale and I looked at it. And again, my first thought was, scale's broken. We'll try a different one. When I stepped on the second scale and the third scale, and they all said the same thing, I realized three scales, probably not all broken at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that really was the moment where I stopped and thought, okay, I have a serious problem. And the problem isn't just the weight. The problem is that as soon as I saw the weight, I refused to believe the evidence. So now it's not just a health problem, it's a mental problem, because I'm choosing to ignore what's right in front of my face. Okay, well, that we seriously need to deal with. Um, I don't remember exactly when that was, what part of the year. I think it was in the spring, because it wasn't long after that things really started to change. And a large part of the reason for that change is because of the woman that I'm now married to. Um, and so that became a really helpful situation for me.
Now, aside from stepping on this scale and seeing this weight, I mean, you were coaching soccer all along the way.
Yep.
So you're
Yep.
running and you're out there coaching, you're on the field, like,
I
and
did a lot of standing and yelling. I didn't do very much running, I'm afraid.
and the other thing is, when you start, you told us that you have a small frame, so
Yep.
when you put on 35, 40 pounds, your clothes are going to start fitting differently. So were any
Yes.
of these things also registering, and you just continued to bury them the same way that you were burying the scale,
Yeah.
or did you not notice
Yeah.
these things?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, the thing is, because I was coaching all the time, most of the shorts I wear had the elastic waistband, so it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that big a deal. It's not like I couldn't fit into my dress pants anymore. I just never got dressed up, and it wasn't a big deal. But the other part is, I have always struggled with being heavy,
Okay.
even for being a small person, and so a lot of the clothes I had already were big, and so they were still tight, but they weren't. Holy crap! I can't even button my pants anymore because they
Mm-hmm.
were already big. And so again, that wasn't as much of an eye opener as it probably should have been. Um, my playing weight in college, it was about 140 to 145, somewhere between 135 145, and that's about where I am now. Um, but at that, again, by the time I got divorced, I was between 165 and 170, and then got up to close to 195. And so again, a lot of the clothes I had at 165 and 170, I wanted them loose and comfortable anyway. So by the time I hit my 190s, they were tighter, but not as much as you might have realized, or as
Mm-hmm.
much as I should have realized.
Right. So you come to this realization in Walmart after stepping on, 3 to 4 scales, and you
Yeah.
know that you have to make a change, right? So
Right.
from that day, what was the very first step that you took in order to make this change?
It was finding somebody to help me. Because I know me and I know that I had gotten myself into that mess by being completely self-focused. And so what I needed was someone to hold me accountable to not make the same decisions that had led me to where I was. And so I started talking with some of my friends and just reaching out to people that I was close to and um, just trying to basically get on a regular schedule of checking in with people and saying, hey, how are you today? What's going on in your world? Here's what's going on in my world. And trying to, again, to find somebody to help hold me accountable to make better decisions.
And that's really funny that you say that, because that was also one of the first things that I did, was that
Nice.
I needed to find somebody, the same thing, that would hold me accountable,
Yeah.
that I could bounce some ideas off of, because
Right.
I, as I said, I was a health and phys ed major, right? So
Hey,
we had to go through these classes. Like, I
right.
knew how to put together a balanced
Exactly.
weightlifting plan.
Yeah, all
Like,
the information.
I
Yeah.
had all the information. I could very, very easily do it. It was just that I didn't have
Right.
anybody to hold me accountable. And still to
Yeah,
this
just don't
day,
want to.
as a triathlete, I have a coach because I need someone to hold me accountable to make sure that I'm doing the training.
Yep.
Like, sometimes
Yeah.
that's just your personality, right? You can't, it's difficult to hold yourself accountable, right? And I think that that's actually
Right.
more common than maybe some people would like to admit.
Oh
Especially
yeah.
as a coach now, I get to see that. But
Right.
you were able to find somebody who was going to keep you accountable. So talk to me a little bit about who this person was, and how you guys met, or did you already know one another and it was just like a kind of, it was mentioned in casual conversation? How does that kind of all
Yeah.
come about?
So the person that ended up really helping me out is now my wife, and I've known her family since I was a teenager. One of my summer jobs was as a lifeguard, and the pool where I lifeguarded, her mom was the manager of. So she's 9 years younger than I am. So I'd known her since she was a kid and I was a teenager, and we hadn't really known each other growing up. Because I had, gone off to college and gotten married and that sort of thing. But by this time, she was in college and she was just coming home for the summertime. I had known her the year before. We had kind of gotten back in touch because she had been dating a friend of mine for a while. And then after they had broken up, she and I had kind of stayed in touch. And what ended up happening is I just kind of mentioned, hey, I stepped on the scale and I'm way heavier than I need to be, and I need to work out this summer so I can get back in shape. I need to lose some weight. And she said, hey, I'll be home in a week. Let's go to the local YMCA and let's work out every morning. And I said, well, that sounds great, but I've got a really rough schedule. One of the other jobs I was working at the time was I was working as a shipping manager for a company that makes sports supplies, and so I had to be in the warehouse every morning at like 7 o'clock. And so that meant asking this college person to get up at 5 a.m. Monday through Friday to come and work out with me so that I could shower and leave by 6:15 so that I could get to, so I could get to work or whatever. And she said, no, that's no problem. I'd love to do that. I'll just go home and take a nap afterward before I get up and go to work. Okay, great. So Monday through Friday, all summer long, she and I got up and met at the local YMCA, and we would basically hit the elliptical machine for like 45 minutes or an hour, lift weights for 15 minutes, and then, I'd go shower in the locker room and I'd head to work, and she'd go home and go to bed and take a nap before she went to lifeguard or whatever she was doing. And in about 2.5, 3 months, I went from 193, 194, I got down to just under 150 pounds. And it felt like absolute pulling teeth to get back under, like to break 150 was just a nightmare. It was so frustratingly hard to get those last couple pounds off. Um, but it was also life changing because I felt better, I looked better, I was more confident, and I mean, anybody who's lost that amount of weight knows when you drop 40 pounds, like everything about your whole world changes. Your habits have to change, your clothes have to change, the way that you spend your free time has to change if you're going to keep that kind of weight off, and and so that was a big, big deal for me. I'd love to say that I've kept it off entirely. That wouldn't be true. Because I kind of went through a second major weight loss this year. Actually, over Christmas break, I stepped on the scale and I was at 175. And I had the same kind of light bulb moment of, okay, this isn't good enough. And so starting on New Year's this year, I started another kind of workout plan and change my diet, and I'm back down to, I think I've lost about 30 or 35 pounds since Christmas this year. And again, it's been with my wife's help because now we're married. Um, and she got up and worked out with me. And so I work out before I go to school. I work out in the afternoons. A lot of times when I come home, we'll go run a few times a week, whatever it is. And again, it's one, it's having somebody to hold me accountable, but two, and more importantly, it's having somebody believe in me that really motivates me to do this well, because she believes that I can be healthier than I believe I can be. And that's motivating to me, knowing that she thinks well of me, that she believes I can do even better than I'm doing. That's a huge help. That's a huge motivator.
Now I gotta ask you, because this is something that I thought of immediately when you first mentioned it.
Hmm.
You've got this chick who's like, yeah, Joel, don't worry about it. I'll get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go with the to go to the gym with you. Like, there wasn't this moment in your head that made you think like, like maybe this girl might kind of have a crush on me. Like I mean, I don't know too many
There
people.
there was definitely that thought was there. The problem is, and I just told a story about this to my high school kids today after after they finished their final. That thought was there. The problem is, I am, and this sounds arrogant, I don't mean it that way. I'm actually pretty intelligent. Like, I'm pretty smart.
Uh huh.
But when it comes to all things female, I am an idiot. I mean, I'm just not bright. And my first wife knew this. My wife now knows this. And so, my wife is very kind. Anytime I do something boneheaded and don't even know it's boneheaded, I'll just tell her, I'm like, okay, um, talk to me like I'm seven. Help me out here because I don't even know what it was that I did. And I know that you're upset, and I see that. And that's a step forward. The fact that I can tell you're upset, that's a win for me. Now I just need to know what I did. So, like, for example, before we even got married, she was at the house where I was living one day, me and a roommate, and my ex-wife came over to pick up our kids. They had been hanging out with me that day. My ex-wife came to pick up the girls, and I helped her load them in the car. And as I'm helping her load them, I start talking with her. And the course of the conversation basically carries us to a place where I look at her, and again, this is with my girlfriend now standing behind me, 5 feet away, and I say to my ex-wife, "Hey, do you remember this movie we used to watch every night to go to bed when we were married?" And we're just talking about this, and I'm thinking, okay, good. And then she leaves, and I turn around and I look at my wife's name now is Mary Ellen. I look at Mary Ellen, and she's just angry, and I have no idea why. And she walks up the steps into the house, and I walk inside, and I look at her, and I say, "It looks like you're upset." And she looks at me, she goes, "Oh, you think?" And I'm like, I do. I think you're upset, yes, but I have no idea what I've done. And anybody with half a brain knows, Joel, you're an idiot. Like, why would you have that conversation ever, but especially in front of your girlfriend? And I get that now. But at the time, I didn't understand why that was a big deal. Like, I didn't understand how hurtful that would have been. And it's because I'm kind of an idiot. So when you say, like, was there this moment where did you think that maybe she kind of likes me? Yes. But I also didn't actually believe it. One, because she's way out of my league. But also, two, like, I was the fattest I'd ever been.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think anybody found me attractive at 195 pounds, let alone somebody as attractive as she is. Like, that's just dumb. That didn't make any sense at all. Um, I through the course of the summer, she dropped enough hints to where I kind of picked up on it. Um, and then I made a bonehead move when she went back to college. I actually started dating someone else, which was yet another very Joel-centric, stupid decision. And then that ended very poorly about 9 months later, and that was when my now wife and I started dating. And thankfully, not only is she a great accountability partner and way out of my league, she's also very forgiving of my boneheadedness. So maybe I just lucked into some. Maybe God was just like, "You've had enough problems. Here's a gold mine for you. Like, here's an easy one. You can. She's wonderful and she's out of your league, but we're gonna be nice to you."
Because I'll be honest, that was the first thing that I thought of. I'm like, man, obviously there's got to obviously be some kind of attraction there, because there's no way. I mean, yes, there are good people left in the world, and there are people who are absolutely love to help people. But
Right.
I think that she definitely could have helped you and said, "All right, well, Joel, here's what you can do. Let's get started, and here's what you could do
Right.
while you go to the gym in the morning, and I'll hold you accountable, and I'll make sure I'll text you or I'll call you,
Right.
make sure you went to the gym that day. Like, I will totally be your accountability partner." But she didn't necessarily have to go
Right.
with you, so that was definitely one of
Right. She
those
didn't
where I
have to
was
get up
like,
at 5 o'clock every day. Yeah, well, that's the thing is that that never occurred to me. I just thought she's just this good of a person. And the truth is it's both. She is that good of a person because she totally would have done that just because she's a good person. And like I said, it took a while of very serious hints being dropped um, before I started to pick up on the attraction that was there. So, I mean, I found her very attractive. In fact, it led to one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. One day we were working out on the elliptical. I was on the elliptical machine. She was running on a treadmill in front of me. Like so, there's a row of treadmills. There's a wall of mirrors, row of treadmills, and then a row of elliptical machines. And I was running on the elliptical machine. I made the mistake of kind of. I mean, I'm a guy, and you've been in a gym where you look at someone and then you look for a long time.
Uh
So when you're running on an elliptical machine, don't stare at someone else because what happens is you actually trip and fall through the front of the elliptical machine.
huh.
And and at that point, there's no excuse. Like you can't fudge your way out of that one. It's like, what were you doing? I slipped and fell. Like no, I was staring at you and I fell down. That's what happened. Sorry. Like there's no, you know what I mean? There's no coming back from that in terms of trying to lie your way out of that one. Like that just doesn't work.
Nope, nope,
Um,
not at all.
So one of the single most embarrassing moments of my life, but at the same time, like it worked out okay. So I'm good. I'm glad for that.
And so, after you start to get your weight and everything back under control, and
Hmm.
you do get back into teaching.
Yep.
So
And that
now,
was also at her encouragement as well, which really helped me out.
okay,
It was a conversation we had one day where she said, listen, you've done all these other things. Teaching is what you love. Go do that. And it was like, that's a good idea. I know I'm not going to make any money doing it, but that's what I love to do. So that was what I ended up going back to doing, and I've loved every minute of it since.
and I mean, not only have you loved every minute of it, but you have been an award-winning teacher, and so did these awards and these accolades and everything come after the divorce? Do you think that
Yeah,
after the divorce you and after trying all these jobs and realizing that this is where your passion was, you actually put more of yourself into teaching than you had in the past?
absolutely, 100%. The thing is, but before the divorce, I was a very self-centered person, but I didn't know it. And after the divorce, I started to realize how self-centered I had been. And then the 9 or 10 years since then have been a never-ending cycle of learning more and more about the depths of my own self-centeredness. But now that I know it, now that I'm aware of it, now I can also start combating it and making conscious decisions about how to be less self-centered. And so, a lot of my teaching before the divorce had been from a very arrogant place. It had been from a place of, I'm the teacher, you're the kid, I know more than you, and I'm going to prove it every single day. And I still had good relationships with a lot of the kids that I taught, but my teaching was very snarky and condescending. And I'll be honest, like I've had conversations with people where they've told me, I don't think I would have enjoyed being in your class, like other adults. And I say, you know what? I'm not sure I would have enjoyed being in my class either at that point in time. Now, I try to teach very differently. I'm still snarky, and I still use a lot of like sarcastic humor, but it's not in the same way that it was before. Now it's much more of a let's joke and have a good time while we are learning, instead of every time you say something stupid, I'm going to make sure that everybody knows how stupid that was because I need to prove that I'm smarter than you. Like it was very insecure, and it was therefore it was like a lot of arrogance trying to cover up that insecurity. At this point, I've been through rock bottom. I've seen how bad of a person I'm capable of being, and I don't ever want to be that person. But because I know how bad I can be, I don't have any right to judge anybody else. So if you come in my classroom and you say something completely boneheaded, maybe you're just having a bad day. Maybe you just don't know anything about what we're talking about. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to purposefully humiliate you in front of your friends as a habit. Like that's terrible teaching. And honestly, like, and I've changed 180 degrees from who I was before, and a large part of that is because of seeing through my wife the different person that I could become. That is, when I was still making terrible decisions or when I was still pretty self-absorbed, she saw the person that I was capable of being rather than just focusing on the person that I was. And again, that's a reflection of who she is. It's a reflection of her faith. Again, we're both very strong Christians, and it's a reflection of who God is and who He sees us as, because He views us as Jesus. That is, He sees us the way that He sees His Son, which is not sinful, which is not broken, which is not terrible. He sees us as redeemed. And when she started treating me as a different person than I was, she started treating me as the person I could be. That motivated me to become that different person. And that's something that I try to reflect in my teaching. I want to teach these kids based on who they can be, not who they are at 15 years old and arrogant and jaded and, teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
I want to teach them for the people that they can grow up into. And again, what that's done is it's caused me to also have to do a lot of soul searching and ask the question, okay, so how did you get it right today? How did you get it wrong today? How can you do it better tomorrow? How can you be more focused on the kids tomorrow and less focused on your own issues? How can you make sure that you don't lose your temper because the same kid asked the same stupid question 4 times in a row? Maybe he just really isn't getting it. So how can you do a better job of that tomorrow than you did today? And again, it's really changed the way that I teach, and I think it's made me a better teacher. I know it's caused kids to enjoy my classes more than they used to, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be able to be better than I was at something that I love so much.
And what would you say keeps you motivated to continue that growth pattern? So you have now changed, and your classroom is more of a classroom where the students want to be.
Hmm.
And you can tell that you're changing, as a person, and you've really changed. And as I said before, you've gotten awards and accolades for being such an amazing teacher. But what keeps you motivated to continue growing as a teacher, as a person, as a speaker, as an author?
Yeah, so I mean, and you know this as an athlete, there's no such thing as stagnating. If I don't continue my good habits, my bad habits will come back because that was my default setting for so many years. And so as an athlete, every day we're either getting a little bit better or we're getting a little bit worse. There's no neutral to be stuck in. Well, that's the same thing for me as a person and as a teacher. Every day I'm either finding some little way to become a better person or a better teacher, or I'm just reverting back to my old habits. And so a large part of the motivation is I know that I still have tons of room to grow. So there's an analogy I use in my classroom. Kids, when you get on to a student for doing something, the student's first defense mechanism is to point at another student who has done something worse than they have and say, at least I didn't do that. And my response to that is to say, that's true, but that doesn't change what you did, right? And so it's the same thing for us as people. Just because I'm better than I was doesn't mean I'm as good as I can be. No matter how much I've improved, I still have room to grow. I still make boneheaded decisions. I still make selfish decisions. I still make mistakes. And so my motivation is I want to continue to become better. I want to continue to get better because I know I can. I know that I can. I know that I can be a better husband. I know I can be a better father. I know that I can be a better soccer coach. I know that I can be a better history teacher. I know that I can be a better speaker and author. And so the question is, how do I do that? Where can I go to find the knowledge that I need? Who can I look to learn from so that I can become better at each of these things? And again, it's just a never-ending process. Like as long as we're alive, we have the capability to become better, or we will become worse. It's only one or the other. Like we're either getting better or we're getting worse. There's not any in between. And so that's really kind of that's the starting point for my motivation is what do I want to do today? Do I want to get better, or am I going to be content just backsliding? Um, and I mentioned that about my weight for a long time. I got content backsliding, and so that was how I got back up to 175 pounds
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't continuing to make the good decisions, whether it was my nutrition or my lack of exercise or whatever it was. Like I was just making crappy decisions, and I was fine with it because my clothes still fit okay, and my wife still thinks I'm attractive, and so it's okay. I'm doing fine. And then one day you step on the scale and you realize, wow, I am 25 pounds heavier than I need to be. How did that happen? And the answer is 2 years of crappy decisions. Okay, well then we need to fix that. And we have those things in every area of our life where I know that I can do better. And so it's just a constant desire to become the best that I can be. And that's something that it was drilled into me at a very young age, both from my dad and my mom, but also every coach and teacher that I ever had. That's something we try to teach kids all the time is like, you have tremendous potential. Great. Go fulfill it to the utmost. And that means every day trying to get a little bit better.
And would you say that that's kind of where the speaking came in? You wanted to find a way to grow, find a way to share what you've learned
Yeah,
through a different avenue as opposed to the teaching? Because I'm sure there's some things that you can share with your students, and there's probably other
right.
things that you have to be careful about sharing with your students.
Sure.
Was this kind of born out of a passion to just continue sharing and teaching and helping people?
Yeah, absolutely it was. It was a question of how can I try to share this important message with audiences of more than just those that have to be in my classroom. Because again, a large part of what I talk about goes back to the gospel. And so the question is, how can I share that better outside the classroom? How can I share that more outside the classroom? And the answer was speaking and writing. And so again, I've been very blessed. I've spoken at churches and high schools and conferences and retreats, and I've spoken at colleges and universities and giant groups and small groups. And it's just I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to do those things. That was also why I started writing, because I've written an ebook and contributed to another book, and I wrote a full-length book, and all of those are just ways to try to share and inspire other people outside of my classroom. But it's essentially, it all comes back to the same thing, and that is I love to teach, and I want to help other people become better versions of themselves. I want to help them become what they could be. And so the question is, how can I best go about that? How can I best help other people?
And if you had to sum it up for us, into maybe just a few sentences,
Hmm.
ultimately, what is the message that you are trying to convey to people, specifically in, some of your books and some of your speaking engagements that you do?
Certainly. So the core philosophy that I talk about is what I call confident humility. And those words sound like a paradox, but they're not. Confidence is simply knowing what you're good at. What are your God-given gifts and talents? And then humility isn't thinking less of yourself. C.S. Lewis tells us humility is thinking of yourself less often. So when you put those together, confident humility is the idea of taking your God-given talents and using them to serve other people. That's all it is. It is gospel-centered servant leadership. Take what you're good at and use it to help other people, whether that's in education or in leadership, or for me again in blended family life. That means what my job is not to serve Joel. My job is to take care of my wife and take care of my kids and have a good relationship with my ex-wife and her husband so that we can work well together raising our kids. That's my job. My job is not to serve me, it's to serve other people. And if I'm doing that, then I'm becoming a better person because it's not about me. And if I can inspire other people to do the same thing, I think that's a pretty powerful message.
And so when we talk about, all of this growth that you've had and all of these things that you've now
Hmm.
kind of transitioned into, aside from not sitting on the couch and wasting your time away, um, what is one thing that you quit doing that you
Hmm.
think has been an enabler to your success?
One thing that I quit doing that's helped me become more successful.
Yes.
Oh man, that's an easy one. That's changing my eating habits at school. The school where I teach has a phenomenally good cafeteria. Um, and it's like we get a lot of kids that transfer in from public schools, and that's one of the biggest things they love because we have great cafeteria food. The problem is, as a teacher, my cafeteria food's free. So I can eat as much as I want every day, and it's really good food. And so for the past 5 months, what I've done is every day, instead of just eating whatever was there for lunch, I just have the salad bar every day, Monday through Friday. Breakfast is a bowl of cereal. Lunch is a giant fat salad with low calorie dressing. And so instead of hamburgers and French fries every Friday, And instead of, pork chops or hamburger steak or ham and fried okra or whatever it is, like I'm having a salad. And so it massively changed what I've been taking in. And that's allowed me to see pretty successful weight loss in the past few months. But it's also reflective of kind of a bigger decision, which is to just really take ownership, take responsibility. I mentioned that light bulb moment and I know it sounds very redneck for me to keep mentioning Walmart because I'm from Alabama. But that's, I mean, it's okay. We live in the South. It is what it is. It's fine. But I had that light bulb moment stepping on that scale, and it was a matter of not taking responsibility. My first inclination was to blame a scale. That's ridiculous, Joel. Come on. And so the other big factor I would say is taking ownership of my decisions. I was fat because I had made crappy decisions. If I'm going to not be fat anymore, it's because I'm going to have to take ownership of my decision making and make different decisions.
So I feel like that is a great spot for us to start wrapping it up, because if not, your wife is probably going to want to kill me, because I feel like I could just continue going on for another hour, 2 hours, because I've just really, really enjoyed our conversation. So, as I said, I think that that's a good spot for us to start wrapping things up. Before we get to it, I want to give you an opportunity to give us some of the places where people can get connected with you, just to say hi, to follow what you're up to, or even to follow the message that you are trying to share.
Well, thank you for that. And I've also had a great time. Yeah, we've got a sushi date planned later, so I need to probably not be late for that. But no, people can find me on my website. It's very easy. It's realLifeLeading.com. You can find me at realLifeLeading.com. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at realLifeLeading. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn under my name, Joel Hawbaker. And on my website, there's an email Joel tab where you can get in touch with me. I'd love to follow up with anybody that listens to this. If I can help out, if you got any questions or if you got comments or whatever, if you want to crack short jokes, feel free. I guarantee, well, I can't guarantee, but I'd be real amazed if you can tell me a short joke I haven't already heard. So, just laying that challenge out there for any of your listeners that want to take me up on that, that's fine. But no, thank you for asking. And I've had a great time. Thank you for having me on. I hope that our conversation is inspiring and encouraging to somebody. And I would love to hear from whoever that is.
No, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that very much. And so before you leave, then, since you are the master of short jokes, I'm sure as a high school teacher, you may have a couple dad jokes in your pocket. And for me, dad jokes are the ultimate. Like I'm not a dad. I'm still young, relatively speaking, but I just get an immense amount of joy out of dad jokes. So to really send us out, can you send us out with a dad joke?
Yeah, so I actually had a kid crack a dad joke just yesterday. I came into my classroom and the student looks at me and goes, "Hey, Coach Hawbaker, did you get your hair cut?" "No, wait, you got all of your hairs cut, didn't you?" Because there's that old dad joke about, "Hey, did you get a haircut?"
Uh
"No, I
huh.
got all of them cut." And that's and it was funny because the kid came in and that was his first thought was to ask the question and then to turn it into the dad joke because that's a large part of what we do in my classroom
Uh huh.
is just to crack goofy silly jokes like that. So that's the easiest one. That's like baseline low hanging fruit dad joke right there.
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
so that's good stuff. I appreciate that. No, and thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate your podcast and what you're doing in terms of inspiring and encouraging other people. I appreciate your vulnerability, sharing your story on your website. I enjoyed reading through that, and I hope that other people continue to really take those messages to heart.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Joel. I appreciate you coming on as well and sharing your story. And I look forward to getting this one out there to everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'd love to chat again in the future.
All right. All right. So, as I said at the time of this recording, it is currently still the weekend. I am hoping that you got a chance to enjoy your weekend. I'm hoping that you got a chance to enjoy this podcast and take a minute to listen to someone else's story and listen to what they have been through. and take something away from it that is really going to help you in your everyday journey and whatever it is that you are up to. That is my goal with this podcast. I love sharing people's stories, and I love sharing things that are going to help others. With that being said, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who shared the episode with Nick Barba. That episode was shared multiple times all over the place on social media, and I want to just say thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I really enjoyed being able to interact with every one of you who shared that for me, and I really, really appreciate that. So make sure, if this is an episode that really hits you, please do me a favor, share it with somebody who is going to benefit from listening to this episode. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that you are getting all of the updates. You know when these episodes are being released. And if you can, please take a minute and leave a review on the Apple Podcasts app. That is it. That is all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoy your week, you enjoy your weekend, you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you will come back and join us again next week.